How's it going, everyone? We are talking about price capping, also known as setting a price ceiling, and how that has an opposite effect of what is intended and can lead to shortages of a product. Now, this subject came up in the recent New York City mayoral debates, but this topic comes up a lot in politics, in economics, where there is something that's considered too expensive and a suggestion is made to just make a law saying you can't charge more than a certain amount for the product. And the idea is, well, if it's forced to be cheaper, more people will be able to obtain it. But the effect actually ends up being the opposite, and less people are able to obtain it if it is forced to be sold at a lower price. And to explain how that works, we are going to use the chart in front of us. Now, there's a lot of things going on this chart, but we will explain them one by one. So you don't have to pay attention to all of it at once, and that will make it much easier to understand. So on the vertical axis, we have price. The higher something is on the chart, the more it represents a product being more expensive. The lower something is on a chart, the more it represents the product being cheaper. On the horizontal axis, we have quantity. The more to the right something is on the chart, the more quantity of a product we're talking about, and the more to the left something is on a chart, the less quantity of a product we are talking about. So, the first thing you want to pay attention to is this downward sloping diagonal line with a D at the bottom. This represents demand. If there is something that is very expensive, so it has a high price, well, there's not going to be as much demand for it. People will not be looking for a large quantity of that product. Whereas if something is cheaper, well, then there's going to be more demand for it. People will be looking for a higher quantity of that product, right? Because if something is cheaper, you have more people trying to obtain it, and if something is more expensive, you have less people trying to obtain it. And that's what that line represents. Now that's why gold is purchased less often than wood is. Gold is more scarce, so the price is higher. And also because the price is higher, people don't buy it as much as they buy wooden products. Now, consider this other upward sloping diagonal line with an S on the end. This represents supply. If something is more expensive, well, then there's a lot of incentive to sell it because you can make a lot of money selling it. And so more people try to produce it and supply it to the market. And so the quantity of that expensive product will start to go up. Whereas if something is cheaper, it's at a low price, well, then there's not as much incentive to sell it because you can't make as much money selling it usually. And so there's not as many people trying to supply more of it to the market. And so supply could stay rather low or not grow much, or perhaps even drop. So you have this opposite effect from the phenomena of demand for a product and supply of a product. Let's say something is very scarce in society. There's not much of it. It's very expensive. There aren't as many people trying to get it, but because it's so expensive, more people will try to supply it to the market, to sell it. And as that supply increases, the quantity of that product will increase and the price could actually go down. Now consider the opposite situation. Let's say something is very abundant. The price is quite low. You have a lot of people trying to obtain this item. Well, because there's so much of it on the market and the price is so low, you don't have as many people trying to supply it to the market, and supply may actually start to go down because there's not as much incentive to sell it. And as supply goes down, the item could actually become more expensive. So, with these forces acting against one another, there is a kind of stable equilibrium represented by these lines intersecting, where you have a natural price of the product and the quantity of the product available and desired, which matches that price. So at this stable equilibrium, you have a situation where there's not much incentive to supply more of the product, not much incentive to supply less of the product, not much incentive to increase the price, and not much incentive to decrease the price. Now, what happens if that price, that natural price, which depends on how much supply of something there is, how much demand for something that there is, what if it's still considered too high? And what if a price ceiling or price cap is set, a law that says, well, you can't charge more than this amount? Well, because it's now cheaper, you can't make as much money selling it, and so less people will be supplying it to the market, and supply of that product actually goes down, and you end up with less of that product available than before. And if there's less of the product available, it means not as many people can buy it. When it was more expensive, yes, it's more expensive, but you could save up money to get something that's more expensive. Whereas if there's less quantity of the product available, it doesn't matter how much you save up. You cannot purchase something that doesn't exist. And that's what's represented by this dot here and this price ceiling right here, and why it decreases the supply, resulting in less of the product available. For example, let's say someone's considering selling their home, but a law is enacted saying they cannot sell it for more than a certain amount. And that amount is a lot less than what they were hoping to sell it for. Well, now they're going to think, well, I'm not going to sell my home anymore because it's not worth the amount of money I'd get for it. Enough people make that decision. Now there's actually less homes on the market and more difficult to obtain a home for those who want to obtain one. Now that's enough to explain why there would be a shortage, but there's also two more things to explain. This dot on the right and this blue double arrow. See, as something is set cheaper, well, now more people see it as affordable and demand for the product increases. So you not only have less supply of the product, you also have more people wanting the product. So more people are competing over a more scarce product, which creates more animosity between people, more harsh competition. And that's what's represented by this blue arrow here. Demand and supply are far apart, creating a shortage. Because by setting that price cap or that price ceiling, not only is there going to be less supply of the product, but even more people trying to get it. And that is why price capping or price ceilings, that is how they can have the opposite effect and actually make a product not only more difficult to obtain, but also create more demand for it and more animosity between people trying to obtain it. Whereas at the natural price, yes, it's more expensive, but there's actually more of it available. And so more people can get it, but you also have less people trying to get it or considering getting it, and so there's less animosity as well. So I hope you enjoyed that, and until next time.